So this is where typically you would be at the end stage of modeling. Everything's kind of modeled. If I go to my outliner, the outliner is a mess. It's just like a bunch of random stuff just kind of thrown in there. By the time we're done with this, we should be able to take it to this stage here where we not only have it, but it also animates. It moves a little bit. Yeah, the background isn't. The background's a picture. What? Yeah, that's the drone you just saw. Yeah. All right, so that's where we're going to take this, and I want you to see those steps because it's little things. It's these little things of making sure your model is good, making sure you have some good textures and organization, and then that will carry over into the next stage and the next stage and the next stage. All right, so my first thing I do in this is I organize it, okay? Once I'm done with my modeling of any object, I go through and make sure it's organized. So looking at this, I know that we want to have some sort of animation happening. This whole thing, I want to be able to move around. One big object, however I want to do that. These propellers, right there, all of these pieces will also spin together too, right? So I wouldn't have just the blade spinning or just the top spinning or like all of this stuff spinning. This is the motor, this is the actual piece that would spin. So I want to keep that in mind. And then all the other stuff can basically be organized just by what they are. Make sure that everything's named. So I'm just going to go through and just kind of group stuff. So I'm hitting Control G. My pivot, whenever I group something, ends up like way over here. So I go to my button and I hit Center Pivot. If you don't have your button, it's under Modify and Center Pivot. And then I'm just going to call this, this is the back of it because the battery pack is right here. So I'm going to call this Prop for Propeller 01. I'm going to grab all these pieces, group them, center pivot it, and call this Propeller 02. I'm going to grab these pieces, group it, center pivot it, Prop 03. And it's a quick way to grab it, just like that. Oops. Group it, center pivot it. Okay. So all my propellers are grouped. I also like to keep the outliner kind of over here so I can look at it and see what's there. You'll see that even though I've grouped them and named them, that they're not showing up anywhere. Because they were already inside of a group, they don't automatically show because they're like nested inside of this group. So if I were to open this up, there's my Propeller 04 group. Here's the cylinder, which is part of that base. Here's my fan blade, which is that thing. And then here is that entire grouping of what that item is. Okay. So I'm just going to Shift P, click on the propeller and Shift P to pull it out of the group. And I'm also going to delete all my history. So I'm going to go to Delete All by Type, History. And I'll just delete any history I may have on this thing. Unparent that one, unparent that one. Okay, so now down here are my 4 propellers. This cylinder here is my antenna, so I'll just go ahead and rename that antenna. This group is these little ribs. So I just made a little inset and then put these little like cubes in there with some bevels. I have those, these ones, and probably 2 on the other side as well. Yep. So I'm just going to group all these and call these vert ribs. And here's a copy of my drone. This is the one I threw onto a layer, so I can delete that. I don't need that. I don't need this layer anymore. Here's the engine, so I'm just going to Shift P to pull that out. And I'm going to call this Engine 02. And I'm keeping things together, so like Prop 2 and Engine 2 go together, right? So it doesn't matter how you name them. I did them clockwise from the top left. I could have named them top left, top right, whatever. As long as you know what they're called. Fan blade, so I'll do the same thing. I unparent it. Fan 02. This is an empty group. You can see how there's a little icon. I'm going to delete that. This is my engine for number 1, so I Shift P, Engine 01. Same thing with the fan blade, Shift P, fan 01. And this is a tiny bar I use for that. So this is my hinge pin. Bat hinge. Bat door. And trust me, this will come in handy later. So don't skimp on this step. Empty group. Just grab both of these and unparent. Delete that one. Alright, cube is the base. Now inside here, I just have one surface. I'm just going to unparent that. Delete it. Main body. There we go. Okay. So, I have my propellers here that I could grab and I could rotate them. And you can see how they all rotate together, which is perfect. My ribs aren't going to be animated. My engines aren't going to be animated. These fan blades are not going to be animated. And the main body's not going to be animated. Okay, the whole thing as a group will be animated, but not the individual pieces of it. Okay, so once I have this done where I've separated these items that are being animated, my next step is to go through and start to group stuff based on their texture. Okay, so like the vertical ribs that are right here. I thought I had some. Oh, I have them all. Okay, those are all my ribs, not just my vertical ones. Ribs. So my engine here, engine here, engine here, and engine there. Most likely these 4 items will all get the same texture. Okay, same color, same whatever. So I'm just going to group those together and just call this the engines group. My 4 fans will probably all get the same color, so I'm going to group those and call this fan blades. Boundary, something. My ribs are there. My main body and my fans would probably get the same texture. Looking at the coloration of this thing here, if this is going to be a white, that's probably also going to be a white, and then the legs would also be a white. I could change that stuff after, but just thinking now of how I want to lay it out, that's my thought process. So I'm going to grab all the items that I think would be white and kind of group those together and just call this the white group. Whatever. Alright, so that looks good. So, my battery door would also be in the white group as well as the battery hinge. So I can just middle drag those into the white group. My antenna would be separate. Okay, so now everything is kind of organized nice and neat. Okay, so now I'm going to take all of the stuff, all those pieces there, and I'm going to Control G to group everything together. Okay, so I have one group that's just called drone. Inside the drone group, everything is organized perfectly. So if I needed to, I could open up anything and find exactly what I need to grab. Now inside of each propeller one, I don't have these labeled, and I should probably label those too. So in this P cylinder 6 is the nut for it. Oops, nut. And then this one and this one are my blades. So I'm just going to rename those. Here's a little trick for renaming multiple items. Where's it at? There it is. This little thing here, if you change this to rename, you could type in a new name. So blades 02. And you'll see how it renamed it blades 02_1_2. So it's a quick way to automatically rename lists of things. I need to keep that one open so I know what it's called. Oops, I didn't name that. And this would be the spinner 02. Alright, so then we go to this one. So this one will be called spinner 03. Again, this stuff just helps when we get to those later stages. And these two, blade 03_2. 4. Goes Okay. Now all my ribs individually don't need to be labeled because I'm never going to do anything different with those ribs. On the propellers themselves, each part of the propeller is going to get a different texture. So like this and this and this will have different textures than this will, than that will. So that's why I want to label them so that I know this is going to get that color on it. Okay. All right. So I'm going to save this as my next increment. And this will be organized. Good. Okay, so that's my organized version of this. Now we talked about doing actual like labels, texture, something on there. We don't need to do anything crazy, but what I do want to do is I want certain things like this specific item here. Maybe I want to put my name or whatever I'm going to call this right on the side, right? So I'm just going to jump into Photoshop real quick. And I'm going to make a new document, and I'm going to make it 4096 pixels by 4096 pixels. Make sure it's RGB. All should be good. Okay. Now I don't know if you guys have ever had like a model car, like one of those ones you buy at the store, and they come in a box, and they take all these pieces apart, and then you get this sheet of stickers, right? And you peel the stickers off and you stick them on your car. That sheet is essentially what I'm creating. So any text, icons, anything that I want to put on my stuff goes on this picture, okay? So if I wanted to create a little logo for my name, I'm just going to grab an area here, and I'll just call this Sarcona. It's super tiny. There we go. And we'll pick a fancy font. Oh, that's a fancy font right there. And we'll also make this capitalized. Where's my buttons? That button there. Bless you. Yeah, that's good. Okay. And maybe I'll even just exaggerate that a little bit more like this. And then maybe add some little graphics off to the side. So I just filled that with black, and then I'm just going to pull it down. Oops. Maybe scale this one up a little bit. Something like this. I'm just going to merge these and then just scoot that over. Just so it kind of matches the same shape of that. There we go. So that's what I want that to be. Now, everything as far as color of my main body, I want to put that in here too. So right now this is white, so my main body would be white. Okay? If I wanted this to be, just for the sake of being able to see this, kind of like this red color here. I'm going to go with a darker red. Let's go with that. That's cool. All right, so I have this dark red color, and then maybe my name and this other text here would be goldish. Fill that in here. Grab that. I should probably make this bold italic. There we go. And then just so I have a little bit more room, I'm just going to center that a little bit better. Okay.
It doesn't matter where you put it.
It doesn't matter where I put it here. We'll adjust that inside Maya. Okay? Because basically we're going to do like we did before, but we're doing it backwards. We're creating the texture first and then picking where we want it to go. Okay? I just need to make sure I have room on here for all the other stuff. So let's say I wanted a graphic on here. I draw a graphic. So just, I'm not going to use this specific one, but just so you can see it, I would put a graphic here. And then just shrink that down. And let's say I grabbed another one of these. So I have something like that, sure. Okay, so whatever I want to put on here, I just put it on here just like it is, okay? So I'm just going to save this as, I'm going to put this inside of my source images. Where am I at? Right there. So this will be called drone labels. And I save this as a TIFF works or a Targa works. Good. Okay. All right. So now what I need to do is get this label on top of here. All right. So we're going to be using a different software to render our stuff out. That's why that rendering looks so good, because I'm using a different software. Maya can do it too. There's just a lot more setup. So I want you to see different aspects. So if you're doing everything in Maya, which you totally could do, you're going to do the same lighting that you did pretty much on the product stuff. So you're just going to create a backdrop, add some area lights, add some Milas for all the textures. Because I'm taking this out of the software, I can really use any of these. So I'm just going to use a Lambert on this, because all I need to do is use this for placement. I need to use this for a way to set up what my texture looks like on the object. So I go here, I map a file, I click on that file. That should be good. I'm going to hit 6. And what's going to happen is, hopefully it doesn't crash, is the label goes on there somewhere. So you can see there's the label. Okay. Now I don't want the label there. What I want to do is put the label right along one of those faces. So I'm going to grab where I want that label to be. Let's say right here. This is the front of it. I guess the side works. Alright, so I'm going to grab these faces here. These 4 here. Just grab all this. That way I really can customize exactly where it goes. Okay? And I'm going to go to UV. I'm going to go to planar mapping. And I just need to pick the direction. This is facing the X direction off to the side, so I pick X. I hit, don't create a new set. I hit project. And there's my label. Now if I go to the UV editor, you can see there's this piece. This piece right at the center of this, that's those faces that I picked. So if I want those faces to have my name, all I have to do is scoot this up. Okay, and as I scooted that up, you can see how it moves those faces, or that label, right inside the name. Perfect. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to grab these faces here. I'm going to UV, I'm going to planar mapping. I'm going to move these faces on top of these faces. Lines up perfectly. Now it's backwards. So all I have to do is go in here and there's a flip. You can see the little triangle thing here. It says flip. Or I can go to polygons, flip, either way. If I just flip it, and there it is. Okay. So now that takes care of these two sides. Now they say Sarcona. Just to, I guess, show this off, let's say I wanted to go inside here. There we go. I want all these faces to have that circle thing on there. I'm going to take it off, but just so you can see it. I would planar map that. I would go in the Z direction because it's facing a different direction. I'd hit project. I'd go to my UV texture editor. And if I pull this off, you can see those faces. They're obviously too big. I need to scale it down. So I switch to my scale tool, and I scale it down. And then I put it at, basically, just move it on top of that. And now I have that circle right at the front of it. Now you'll see, too, that this circle is not a circle, right? This is kind of like an oblong shape. I could tweak it inside here, like if I scale this in, it'll make it more circular. So I do have the ability to kind of tweak stuff to a point. So if I wanted to keep that there, there it is. Okay. I actually don't. That looks kind of silly. So I'm just going to go to shell, and I'm just going to move it out of there. Okay. So here's what I want to do. I want to make sure that my name is not anywhere else, like that crazy spot on here. I want to make sure that everything else is getting somewhere in this blank area. So where there's a blank area, that's where I want all the other UVs to go. So if I am in the UV editor and I right click and go to shell, I can click on other pieces and move them around. There we go. So here's all the pieces that are not where my name is supposed to be. And you can see how I can just scale them down and just throw them off into the corner. So now they're all red. They're just getting the red from that image. Okay. Now these things here too, and here too, and here too, and there too, these are all going to get that same exact thing. So I'm going to assign that same Lambert to it. You'll see probably on here, maybe not. Yeah, there you go. So right here, there's part of my name. Because those UVs, how that object is unfolded and laid down, is intersecting my stuff. Go back to the UV editor, and I can see where it's coming in. And so all I have to do is just go to my shell, scale it down, and just marquee it so I grab both shells, scale it down, and just stick it off into the corner. Okay? So I'm going to do the same thing for these blades. This, 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 and that. Go to my shell, grab everything, and I shrink it really far down just so it's obviously nowhere near the other stuff. There we go. So now all of my UVs for everything I want red is just kind of off in that corner, and then all the stuff that I want my name is up top. Okay? So I have to do all of that stuff while I'm inside the software. If I'm not in the software, I can't do that. It doesn't work as good outside. All right, cool. So now what I want to do is I need to export this thing out to the other software. Now if I export it like this, what it's going to do is it's going to come in like this. See how blocky my blades are? Okay, they're not 3. This does not carry over into the other one. It only carries that over. Okay. Also, all these surfaces that are gray will basically come in as one surface, and it makes it very difficult for us to texture stuff if everything's the same color. Okay. So any pieces, I'm going to go back to my outliner. Any pieces that I want to bring over, I need to make sure that I have them assigned some sort of material and some sort of color. So here's my ribs. I'm just going to assign any color. I'm just going to assign a Lambert, and I'll make this a really weird color like blue. I'll grab my engines, which are these pieces. I'll assign another Lambert, and I will color this pink. And my white group has already assigned something. My antenna, I'll assign something to it. Okay, they all can be the same color too. I just like to give them different colors because it looks kind of neat. There's my hinge pin. That will get a different color too. There we go. This stuff here, remember that's going to be part of the white group. I forgot to grab that. So let me reassign my Lambert 1 or 2. And then let me make sure that the UVs are not on top of it, which they are. I need to fix it. So shrink it down, stick it there. If I had something for the back battery door, like maybe I had a white sticker on there that would say battery do not eat or something like that, I could put that on my label, project it back there, and then it would still work. Okay, so anything you want to be labeled on there, you could. If I had a camera, I could get a picture of a lens and project it onto the camera lens, and it would look like a lens on top of it. All right, so that's done, and you can see with these crazy colors it's pretty obvious what you have done and haven't done. Oops. So I'm going to grab these, I'm going to assign a Lambert to it, and I'm not even labeling these, I'm just giving these a random color. Grab these guys. And assigning a Lambert and giving it some random color. Here's a nice tip too, like these nuts are kind of small. I want to grab them inside of the outliner. It's very difficult to select things in the outliner when I have to keep opening stuff. If I type the first part of this with an asterisk and then hit enter, what? Maybe I didn't call it nut. There we go. There it is. Okay, so it'll show me everything that has that word nut inside it, and then I hold shift and click this, and then I can very quickly control click each one of those pieces. I don't shift click, I control click. And then I will assign another Lambert. And then each one's getting a different Lambert, and you'll see why once we get into that other software. Okay. So there's that. Now the next thing I can do, or should do, is probably animate it. Now there's something weird about how KeyShot animates stuff. It's very different than Maya does it. So what I want to do is I'm going to go back to the outliner. I'm going to grab my drone, and I'm going to just animate the drone's movement inside of Maya. That will go into KeyShot. This is the other software. And then we'll animate the propellers inside of KeyShot. Okay? So I'm going to go to my heads-up display, UI elements. I'm going to turn on my time slider, range slider, show all. There we go. Someone hit all my curve editor stuff down here. So to keep this kind of small, we're going to stick with 120 frames. That's a good range to go with. That gives us about 5 seconds of animation. Looking at what we would do for this, I want to basically have the things stopped. There's no motion on them. They start spinning, and after a few seconds, it starts to take off and kind of wobble into the air. Okay? So I know that from here to, let's say, about 60, this thing is going to be stationary on the ground. And then after 60, it's going to start to wobble and come up. So I'm going to go to the drone, and I'm going to hit S to set a key on it. Then I'm going to go up to 120, pull it up, and hit S to set another key. So this is what I have so far, just like that. Then I'm going to go maybe a little bit like this, and maybe give it a little bit of rotate, set a key, go up a little bit more, set a key. See, I'm just kind of wiggling it a little bit, just so it doesn't feel like it's just moving straight up. It's going to feel like it's wiggling. So now we'll rewind it and hit play. There it goes. Now it's going really fast. I'm going to right click, playback speed, make sure this is set to real time. There we go. Okay. Now it feels kind of mechanical still, like it feels like it's hitting spots. So I'm going to go to Animation Editors, Graph Editor, and I'm just going to click on these, and I'm going to do a couple things. One of them is I'm going to set all their tangents to be spline. Where's spline at? Right there. And what this does is look at the default, and then look at spline. You can see how the curves are just a little bit more smooth and curvy. The other thing I'm going to do is just kind of move these points around. So I'm grabbing this with my left mouse, holding Shift and middle mouse button, and I'm just offsetting these slightly. So what this does is it randomly moves it around. So instead of all the things happening at the same time, there'll be just a little bit of overlap between all the actions. So again, it should feel a little bit more realistic. So I'm just holding Shift and middle dragging to move that over. Should be good there. Alright, so now let's take a look at that. So all we did was made it spline and then just offset those keyframes a little bit. So nothing. There we go. So now it feels a little bit more natural. It feels like it's kind of taking off, but at the same time, it feels like it's maybe kind of trying to balance itself. There's a little bit of a jump in there I'm not really happy about. I'm going to go to my Translate Y, which is where I think it is, and I'm just going to pull that back. There you go. That feels better. Okay. Cool. All right. So now that I have that, I can take this into KeyShot after I actually smooth it out. Okay, so remember it's going to come in with these blocky things. So I need to see what I want to preview in 3. If I hit 3 on everything, it's going to take a second to load. Maybe. Oh, there it goes. And there's some things I don't want to be in 3 mode. I believe it was this, yeah. See, these look weird in 3. When they were in 1, they look fine, but in 3, ugh. So I don't want those to go in 3, but everything else I do, okay? So I'm going to grab all the stuff in my scene, and I'm going to deselect these, because I don't want those to go into 3 mode or into smooth mode. That should be fine there, that should be fine, okay. So now I'm going to go to, save this first. You always want to save these in iterations because once you do this, it can be very difficult to go back. So I'm going to go to smooth, and this is actually going to smooth it out. So when I take this into KeyShot, it will actually be smooth. And because it's doing it to so many surfaces, it's going to take a few minutes to do. Now this is the this is the difficult part, the Maya part, setting it all up, getting it prepared. But once you take it into this other software, you'll see how much more intuitive it is, and really it becomes more of us customizing what we want this to look like. It becomes more about what colors do you want this and what shapes do you want here, as opposed to, you know, just doing the stuff that we've been doing. All right, so that should be good there. These could probably use another division on them, just because they still look really blocky. So I'm just going to grab all of these, and I'm just going to do another smooth on it. Maybe do 2 on there. All right, that should be good. The base looks good here. That looks good there. Okay, everything else looks good. All right, so now I'm going to save this as. And again, I'm saving this as because I don't want to overwrite one of my other files. Okay, so now I've saved it. It's ready to go into KeyShot. I just need to export it into a format that KeyShot recognizes. So I'm going to go to File, Export All. Export All. And I'm going to turn on FBX. Okay, so FBX is a certain kind of format. If you ever take anything from Maya into a video game or Maya into any other programs, FBX would be one of those formats that goes back and forth. So I need to set up a couple things in here. Scoot this over. Under the advanced options, under FBX file format, I need to make sure it's 2014, 2015. No idea why, you just have to. Under animation, I need to make sure my animation is set. If my animation is not set, then it will not come in. I'm also going to do what's called baking the animation. Inside Maya, it's kind of figuring out what happens between the keyframes. I don't want KeyShot to do that because KeyShot will do something different than what we just saw in Maya. So baking it writes out every single keyframe. Okay, so literally there's no guessing as far as what's happening. So 1 through 120 should be good. That's my keyframes I have. Everything else should be good. I'm going to give this a name. And that exports it. You might get a pop-up. It might say something about couldn't do this or that. Typically it's fine. And now I'm going to open up KeyShot. Okay? Now watch how easy this is going to be. I'm going to import my model. So I just go to the start menu, find KeyShot, import my model. Find my file. There he is. And then again, more important stuff to make sure you do. For the location, I hit keep original. For the size, keep original. For the up orientation, we're doing Y. Some programs use Z as their up and down. And then environment and camera, we can just leave that stuff alone. Okay? Using the keep original means whatever your sizes and position is inside of Maya, bring that in too. Okay? So now the controls are Maya's. Spin around, zoom in and out, pan around. Same exact controls. Okay? Now you'll see it kind of flickers, it gets really grainy, and then gets clear. So what's happening is every time we move the camera, it's re-rendering it. So instead of you having to hit that render button every time, it's automatically rendering it every single time you move the camera. Okay? Now that might seem like really ridiculously slow, but you'll see how quickly I can move stuff around, and then it goes back to that. Move stuff around, goes back to that. Okay? So here's what's neat about this. So for my, you can see my name came in, there it is. For my propellers here, let's say I wanted this to be a different material. Like I want my propellers to be a plastic, I want it to be a hard plastic, and I want them to be shiny. And let's say I wanted them to be gold. So I drag this, I bring it over to my propellers. Because they're all labeled with the same exact material, see how it found all the propellers, and I just drop this on it. And so now they all have that material. And then if I want to change my engines, I just zoom in on an engine. I go over here to the metals, and I say, what kind of metal do I want? Nickel? Sure, let's try that. So I'm going to do a set nickel on these. Again, it finds all the other ones, and then I drop it on there. And then I can look at it and see, do I like that? Let's say no. Let's say I wanted to go with something polished. There we go. Now it's polished, right? So it becomes much more easy once you understand just these basic kinds of setup things. If we didn't do all that setup stuff, it wouldn't have worked like this. It would not have worked like this. It would have been a bit more of a hassle. I actually do like the chrome black. That's I don't know if I use that same one on mine, but I like that texture. Some of these are textured. Like you'll see, like this has some bumps on it, like this. We didn't lay out any other UVs in the scene. That won't turn out like a nice bump, okay? So I would avoid using those kinds of things on there. You can try it out, see if it looks good. If it doesn't, drag something else onto it. So now it just becomes a game of what do I want stuff to look like, and it's amazingly easy. Just like, ooh, I want this to be glass. I don't want it to be glass, but just so you can see it. Here's something kind of neat too. Look at that. Okay, so that's kind of cool. Let me grab some sort of metal down here. That's cool there. And I may even say like, hey, that metal looks really cool. I want that on the body of my ship. Drag this and everything gets it, right? Oops. Now you'll notice that my name went away. So I don't have my name in there anymore. So what I can do is I double click on any piece. When I double click on it, it brings up my properties. So this is just like your attribute editor in Maya, where we can go ahead and tweak a lot of the stuff. So instead of this color here, I'm going to go to textures, and I'm just going to load in my texture. So I click the little check box that says, all right, where's your texture? And I go and find my texture. There it is. Now it's not going to label it or put it in the right spot, so I have to go down here to the mapping type and change this to UV, and then scroll down and just make sure that DPI is unchecked. And once I do that, you'll see how I get that painted material. Like this looks like a car paint material, and it puts my label right there, which is awesome. Let's go to those ribs and let's color the ribs. So these ones I wanted to go with the plastic, and I wanted it to be like a soft rubbery material like a tire. There we go. And I'll do the same kind of thing up here. Oops, not that. Right there for the antenna. Okay, so because I grouped stuff, because I organized it, boom, look at that. It's amazing. It's texture. Right? That's pretty much all we have to do for texture. We can go through and tweak everything. All the stuff that's here we can choose. Like if I don't like this, I just double click the propeller. Here's the material. I can change the color. I prefer the HSV, whatever they want to call it. That there. I think I need to go a little bit darker on this. Because of the lighting in the scene, sometimes you have to go a bit darker just to get the color you want. That's cool. Alright. I can also change the kind of material. So if I click on where it says plastic, those are all like basically like the options, right? So right now there's specular, roughness, diffuse, and there's an advanced tab with some more stuff. If I chose something like diffuse, it literally just gives you color. Like here's, you have color and that's it. If I made this a gem, then they would look like glass. Look at how easy that is. If I made this emissive, these would actually emit light. So if I went in here to my, I should probably save this. There we go. If I went under my settings, I could do things like global illumination, or ground illumination too. I think that would light up more. It's not lighting up as much as I expected it to. Maybe I need to crank this color up. There we go. So it's kind of lighting up the area a bit more. Whatever. I'm not going to use that anyway. I'm going to go back to my plastic. There we go. Okay. All right, so now what I need to do is I can play with the colors all day long. Tweak all the colors that I want. If I get a texture on something I don't like, I just uncheck it, texture goes away. It's not on there anymore. The other thing I want to do is animate those wings, these propellers spinning around. So under the scene, you'll see that this is where all your stuff comes in. Here's my model. So this is like the outliner. Here's my drone. Here's all my stuff nicely animated. Or not nicely animated, nice organized. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab one of these items, and under animation, down here, I'm going to go to the animation wizard. This is why it's weird, because it just comes in with this like weird interface. And it says, what do you want to do? And I want to model/part animation. I want to rotate it. And then it says, okay, well, which way do you want to rotate it? They'll say that next. Prop 4, that's the item I'm rotating. And then here's where it's going to tell me which direction I want to go. So this should be the Y direction, around like this, okay? And then how many degrees do you want to rotate it? So it's not like you set a start point, you set an end point. You're saying over this distance here, how many degrees do you want to rotate it? So I think I put like 12,000, okay? Because think of it, it has to spin like crazy quick in order to lift off the ground. Axis orientation, original location, pivot point is at the center. That's where I want to keep that. And then time settings, I believe I want to ease in, yes. Okay, so it starts a little slower at the beginning, picks up speed. And then my duration is going to be, I'll just edit this afterwards. Okay, there we go. So I can just grab this and just stretch it out. All the way to about 5 seconds. There we go. Okay, so now if I were to hit the play button, you can see that back one. Woo, there it goes. Okay, so now I want to take that animation and apply it to all my other ones. Scoot that down. So here's the animation. So it makes this, that's my animation happening. I'm going to, I think it was copy it, and then I just click on this and paste it. That wasn't it. I alt drag it, that's what I did. You alt drag into the other ones. There we go. So now if we hit play, they all spin. Okay? Now I have to fix one thing. They're all spinning in the exact same direction, which would not work correctly. Usually the spin in opposite directions on opposite sides. Okay? I don't know what the exact formula is, but it just looks weird when they all spin the same direction. So what I want to do is grab, let me rewind you to the beginning. Let's say prop 1 here. That's good. And prop 3. Nope. 4. There we go. Okay. Just making sure I have the right ones. So I click on those ones, and all I do is put a little negative sign here, so it's going to spin negatively. So now when we hit play, they're spinning in opposite directions. Wonderful. Okay. Now, animation's done. I can close the animation button right here. I'll save again. All right. Now, in the example I showed, this one, he wasn't on a white screen. He was in a, I don't know, a garage or something, right? So over here, this is all your library stuff. Environment, it's an interior, and it's a, oh, it's so dark in here. I believe it's this one. Drag this, drop it into there. Now he's on the cement. And then we can spin it around. Yeah, I don't think this is the exact same one. Or maybe it is, yeah. Now he looks like he's floating, like his shadow is like way high up. So I'm going to grab my drone export. I'm going to go to my options down here, and I'm going to say position, snap to ground. And that'll just snap it to the ground, making it feel like it's actually sitting right there on the ground. We can control the camera some, so if I go up here to my camera settings, and and I set this to like 24, I get more of the perspective that I had inside of mine. 42 looked like it was okay too. There you go. So now it's really just like, oh, where do you want this to be? You just kind of move it around. There we go. Cool. Let me bring my animation back up. Let me make sure we don't go out of frame, which I am. So just zoom out a touch. There we go. Good. Okay. All right. So that's the animation part. That's the rendering part. You can go ahead and tweak your shaders. I probably spent, I don't know, maybe an hour and a half or so just kind of tweaking things, just refining it. Really just playing with color and getting the colors to look nicer together. On this one, I'm not too thrilled that this and this are not the same color, so I'd want to go through and tweak those two things. I want to make sure that my name on there and the propellers are the same color. I could also tweak my environment by going here and playing with the contrast. So pulling the contrast up gives me more contrast in my rendering. Pulling it down will give me a more softer rendering. Taking the brightness up will brighten the rendering. The size of this will increase the size of the picture. Okay, if you go down too far, it's going to be like that. You can move the height of it, so if you need to move the height just so it kind of appears differently. You could also rotate it around. There you go. Yeah, and you can keep playing with other stuff like that. There we go. Cool. All right, now for more weird stuff. Like I want to set this to a good resolution to render out a movie. Our stills that we rendered out before, we rendered out bigger sizes because it's a still. With this, we're rendering out an animation, so we have to keep that stuff in mind. So our resolution for rendering an animation, this is what we did on Batman, or on the Gotham one, was we did 960 by 540. Now you would think typing in numbers would work, and it, for whatever reason, that's a glitch, a bug, or whatever, it doesn't work. And it doesn't work because this window is maximized. I have to unmaximize it like this. And then I can type in, hey, then I can type in 960 by 540, and then it works. And then I can lock my aspect and lock my resolution, and then I can make this bigger. It's thinking. Oh. Let me close this because I'm done with that. Let me close my project settings. I'm done with that. Make that bigger. There we go. Okay. So now this is the resolution I'm rendering this out at, 960 by 540. So then I go to render and I go to settings first, and then I go to motion blur because I also want to look at the motion blur on this too. There we go. So as those blades are spinning, if I didn't have motion blur, it would look like, I don't know, jumpy or something. With motion blur, those blades are going to spin, and you can see these three, especially not that one so much. It definitely looks more like they're spinning because we have that motion blur on there, okay? With that too, you have to play with the color of your blades so that the motion blur comes off. If your color's too light, it won't come off. It won't look good. So you usually have to pick a bit darker color so it registers better. All right, so that's good there. Now I'm gonna go to render, and I'm gonna say I want to, every time I want to make sure I just save this. Back to render. We're going to do an animation, 960 by 540. My frame range is the same one from Maya, 1 to 120. We're outputting frames, and we have to make sure this is set to where we're saving stuff. Right now it's saving to the C drive. You don't want to save to the C drive. You want to save to your folder. So I would click on the folder button, and I would find my images folder. And then this is fine. Drone rendering, I don't need the setup part there, but I guess I can leave that. And then the format I would leave as a TIFF. And everything else is good there. Quality, I need to set this to maximum and put this at like 128. It's a good number to have. It'll be nice and smooth. Everything else should be good. Then I hit render. Do you want to overwrite? So what it's going to do now is it's going to go frame by frame, and it's going to render our stuff out. So down here it says set up a frame 1, 8 cores, so it's using all the processors. 0.2 seconds is what it's currently working on. And you'll be able to see each frame as it's rendering itself out. So it's still doing frame 1, still doing frame 1. Eventually you'll get to frame 2. Eventually. There you go. So now we're on frame 2. Now it didn't show the motion blur on there, but the motion blur is there because we turned it on and we saw that it was working. For whatever reason, it's not displaying it here. So we just let this go. We put our render sign on. With this one, we have to leave the software running. We have to leave it open and just hope that nobody screws with it. If anything, let's say that it stops. We could always, let's say, stop it and then start it off at frame 2 and go from 2 to whatever we're doing, or 50 to whatever we're doing. If we, sure. What was that? If we wanted to, we could also lock our camera. Oops, lock the camera. That way nobody can move the camera. So if we try to spin around, that won't happen. What could happen is we render our stuff, something happens, we need to pick it back up again, but someone moved the camera. Now we have to re-render the entire thing because one camera is showing it here, another camera shows it from over there. Okay, so locking the camera is always a good thing to do. Yeah. Okay, so with this assignment, you're going to turn in our movie. So you render it out 1 to 120, make that into a movie, and then what I want you to do is also make a still image. Okay, because this software is so intuitive, it's very easy to just make a still image. So if I want to make a still, I'm going to add a camera. So now I have a new camera. My old one is still locked. I'm going to bring back my stuff. I just need to hide some of this. Come on. Animation goes away. There we go. I need to show my scene. There it is. Library. There we go. For the still image, you probably want to grab one of the studio pieces and find which one of these studio pieces is going to work best for you. And then maybe I'll do a little bit more dynamic angle on my item. Maybe that's too dynamic. Yes. Not really thrilled about that one. Maybe that one. There we go. That one looks good. Okay. And I'll even go up in my timeline just so I can get more of an interesting frame here. There we go. And this is where I may want to come into my materials. This is where it helps to pull it off to the other side. Into my environment, and maybe take the brightness down. I want to get it from this angle here. I'm just going to rotate this. There we go. All right, so when I do a still, I go to render, still image, set up your stuff. The size of this, they even have print size, that's what we want. We're going to do a 10-inch by 8-inch rendering. Come on. Maybe not that big. It's not going to let me. Let's do half that. So a 5 by 4. Come on. Oh, I was locked. I set this to 5. 4. Nope. I have something clicked somewhere. Oh, there it is. I still have this locked. That's why I can't change it. So now I go back to my settings. It's still locked somewhere. Hold on. There we go. There we go. So now it's working. So I had to change it in the other spot first. So 5" by 4", 300 DPI, and then I would render this out, and it would just save that image. So here's my rendering of the animation, and then I have my still. Right there. So I kind of got a little bit closer to it in this one than that one. And I also played around with some of these other settings that are here. On my camera, if we scroll down a touch, there are some lens effects that we can play with, like depth of field. So I could actually render depth of field through this. Click on this to select what's in focus. That's in focus. I can play with my f-stop to control how much is in focus. I could also do things like have this little bloom effect. I can also add a vignette to it. And then I would go ahead and render that out and save that image. Okay, so when you're done with this, you'll have two things. You'll have a movie, and then you'll have a single image that you'll turn in with your stuff. All right, sounds like a lot of things, but once you get the stuff organized, set up, brought into KeyShot, this part is going to be super quick-ish. Okay. All right, any questions on that? Nope. All right.